couples therapists, without breaking confidentiality, what are some relationships that instantly set off red flags, and do you try and get them to work out? I saw a couple that was doing retaliatory cheating and telling each other about it. When they got through their anger, they decided to call a truce and made peace. With their level of emotional maturity, I doubt it lasted. I don't know if I helped them or prolonged their suffering. It was their decision to come to counseling, so I think it was the help they wanted. Other clients realize what they really want is divorce counseling. What's the best way to behave civilly and minimize damage to the kids while we go our separate ways? People who approach therapy with the idea that they must convince the therapist that they're right and their partner is wrong. Almost like they're complaining to a parent or boss to have them sort out the problems. Contempt. When I experience true contempt from one in the relationship, I know it is usually over. Look towards a peaceful ending at that point if possible. It's very easy to work out when one person knowingly prioritizes their own wants and needs over their partner's. Relationships like this are often doomed because the person simply doesn't care enough to make any meaningful change. I'm not a therapist, but my therapist straight-faced told me that there are worse options than divorce. Got divorced and it was the best thing that happened to me. That's what my therapist said to me shortly after we got kicked out of couples counseling because my partner was so unmanageable. It genuinely was the best decision for me. My partner is still angry I left, but I've never felt better about myself. Cheers to you and your self-preservation. I'll just say that if you find yourself screaming him not ducking yelling at you, you might have a communication problem. Edit. I want to add a more thoughtful note, but I should also mention that I mainly work with individuals. Similar to what others have said, the reddest of flags for me is when clients try to get me to take sides. I can understand why people may do that every now and then during more difficult discussions, but if it happens consistently, it's a huge problem. There are plenty of reasons that people may do this, but the reality is that therapy is meant to foster cooperation between partners. Feeling like you need the therapist on your side indicates you're approaching the relationship as a competition, not a cooperative interaction, and nothing good comes from that. Also, I once had a supervisor who did a great deal of couples work tell me that it has such a bad success rate because people rarely come before the relationship has crossed the point of no return. Unfortunately, that seems to be a very accurate description. Whataboutism. Instead of taking ownership and responsibility for their contribution to the degradation of the relationship, one or both parties simply point out an example of the other exhibiting a similar behavior. It's a red flag because it illustrates their lack of self-awareness and poor communication skills. Communication is key when trying to mend a tattered relationship, because without respectful communication the conflict recovery process can never begin. In the conflict recovery model, both parties agree to the terms under which they will communicate. No yelling, no interrupting, no I told you so's, etc. Each party gets a chance to share how the other's actions make them feel. Then they each propose their solutions and identify where they made assumptions or where they got triggered and why. Then they identify where they are willing to compromise. Next, we create an actionable plan with deadlines, and we monitor the progress to see if the proposed solutions were effective. Everything can go to shit, but once communication stagnates, you're in real trouble. So even if you're arguing, you're still doing okay. You just need to work on how you're communicating. Constant, needless escalation. When I don't think we need this expensive thing is escalated to "you don't really love me." Major problem. It shows up quickly in therapy if you're watching for it. Mostly because the one using this to avoid accountability is almost guaranteed to play this card in relation to therapy itself. Either I had to drag them here, or they are just trying to break up with me. What they are doing is avoiding conversation about the issue by blowing it up into a bigger problem than it is, so they can make the other person respond to their feelings rather than dealing with their concerns. I'm not a couples therapist, but I recommended a couples therapist to a coworker for some premarital counseling. My partner and I had really enjoyed our premarital sessions from this super nice therapist, and when a girl from my work got engaged she asked for his number. The day after their first session I got a call from the girl saying, "I can't believe you sent me to this horrible, invasive, rude counselor." I was in a panic. "Oh no, what happened?" she explained. We went in there and sat down, and the first thing he asked was, "So, why do you want to get married? How rude is that? Question mark. How dare he? Exclamation mark. That's when I realized that maybe their relationship wasn't going to pan out. They called off the wedding a few months later. Not my client, but I had to watch as my own roommate dealt with her fiance. He was A. controlling her, physically/activities/financials. B. continuously dismissing her feelings/assessments/opinions. Fiance would revert to baby talk, speaking to roommate like she was an uneducated child. Daddy knows best type of gaslighting garbage. C. trying to hide his narcissistic tendencies behind his good church boy exterior. This was all happening in my condo while she was waiting to move out and marry him. I usually tried to stay out of their issues, but one afternoon I softly encouraged her, saying I agreed with her. An argument I'd witnessed earlier in the day. She came back that night after the fiance convinced her that I was jealous and was trying to break them up so I could have him. Apostrophe. She barely talked to me again until she moved out. Sadly they did get married, have 2 kids, and she's a completely isolated, stay-at-home mom. I don't even want to imagine what it's like for her at home. I was in couples therapy. At the end of the first session, the therapist asked us to say one nice thing about each other. I went first, said something nice about him. Therapist asked him to say something, and he replied, "My mother always told me, if you can't say something nice, say nothing. So I'll say nothing." Felt so sorry for the therapist. And yes, that's when I started planning my exit. I'm now very happy in a new relationship and my revenge is to be living my beat life. Very happy now. I'm reading through these as a mental checklist to keep in check my own actions, not just my partner's. Thanks everyone for sharing. My mom is a couples therapist and she says there are some people that she has told you're not going to work out on the first couple sessions. I'm a therapist, newer to couples counseling, but one of the flags I've seen is one person digging their heels in and not accepting any feedback or suggestions. Then that person tells me and partner that they are trying. I called him out on it, said that he needed to evaluate what he's willing to do and not do. Needless to say, didn't hear back from them. Another weird one is separating without a plan. All that's gonna do is teach you how to live without each other. I would ask them, okay, how do you know when the separation works? I dunno. When I start missing them, I guess is what I typically hear. As a clinical psychologist, I focused mainly on behavioral medicine and cognitive assessment, but did my fair share of marriage/couples work. Refusal or inability to compromise is a ginormous red flag, one that, I believe, is empirically validated. Compromise is a significant predictor of satisfaction in relationships, and it plays an important role in the long-term success of marriages and relationships in general. Good question. I doubt I have much to add that others haven't already said, but the biggest one I notice is respect. Respecting space, boundaries, feelings, interests. Relationships are also important and lack of respect by either person for the other is going to mean big problems. I would definitely try to help them work through it, but it's hard to point out to someone that something they are doing is hurting the other, which leads to my second red flag. Lack of communication. Lol. My mom is a therapist and she sometimes tells me a little bit about her cases, nothing specific or identifying. She once came home really upset about a case and told me a little bit. Basically this guy sent his wife in because she was having trouble with a baby. He came with her and interrupted her at basically every turn and basically told my mom his wife was bipolar. In another session the patient admitted she almost felt angry with the baby and herself because she knew she would be a terrible mother. Her husband had been saying it since she got pregnant. My mom told me it became almost instantly clear that the husband was manipulative and abusive, and probably trying to stop her from connecting with the child. As soon as my mom suggested she was angry with her husband and not her baby, all of their future sessions were cancelled. I was just talking about this case today. Years ago when I was starting out, I had a female client come in and she reported anxiety, depression, etc. because her ex-husband was bothering her. I thought that was completely average and normal, so I asked her about it. She recounted many times that her and the ex clashed. I said, you know, you don't have to interact with him, and maybe just distancing yourself is the way to go. Then she told me that they still lived together and had no plans of moving. The red flag. Indicted: I was dealing with two crazy people. My parents are this. Legally separated but live together. I'm the poster child for don't stay together for the kids. We are all adults now, but they still live together because separating assets is hard, and they are both so crazy no one else will keep them company. I'm an MFT, marriage and family therapist, and for me, an unofficial litmus test is when I ask at some point in the first few sessions how the couple met. If there is absolutely no positive effect from either person, no one even cracks a smile, or they just give me a single sentence answer, we met at a party, that's usually a signal they've been so unhappy so long, or the conflict is so overwhelming that they can't access those good warm fuzzy feelings from the beginning. I partly wanted to do this job because I'm a romantic at heart and love hearing real love stories, and for the most part, hearing about their first few months together is an actually fun and illuminating part of therapy. Only a few times have I seen the flat or no effect couples, and it breaks my heart every time. I remember learning in grad school that most couples who come for therapy have lived unhappily for an average of 7 years before trying to get help. They come for that first session, and if they aren't cured after that, most think that therapy doesn't work and don't come back. To anyone who may be considering individual or couples therapy as a result of this thread, go for it, and be prepared for it to take some time and energy from you and your therapist. Reading all of this just makes me realize how lucky I was to muster up the power to break up with my ex. I knew she was horrible and toxic towards the end of things, but holy shit, it's worse than I thought. Saying directly to each other, I don't love you, I'm just here to try and like you enough to stay together, and the other person replaying with good, we can do that. Partners refusing to listen, absolutely deafening themselves to certain explicit statement, active physical abuse and each person admitting it and trying to be okay with it, name calling in session, and when I intervene they both get mad at me, complete disrespect and true contempt with each other, yet refusing to accept their relationship is over. I could keep going. These are obvious red flags. Gottman's research does a good job of answering the opposite of this question. He studies what factors predict a couple will stay together. He has like 90% accuracy. I've seen individuals that did coursework in couples therapy. It's always a dooming sign when one of the patients doesn't want to be there and is unwilling to try. Those never end well. Basically true of any therapeutic environment. I worked in a live-in drug rehab facility, and it was pretty easy to tell who wanted to be there and who didn't. Some people would go through the motions and all our therapy sessions would occur at a surface level. They were not looking for anything except to be done with their time there. Those are the hardest clients to work with too, because you can try all kinds of methods, but things will never go anywhere. I imagine with couples therapy these are usually the types who begrudgingly agree to enter counseling when they really just want to split up. All these responses have made me so much more grateful for my younger sister, who pestered me until I was in tears of anger to leave my ex. Within a week I could see how much better my life was without him. I'll never be able to tell her how much it means to me that she was ready for me to hate her, as long as it meant I was away from him. What I loved about our marriage counselor is from the start he said his job wasn't to try to get us to stay together, but guide us for us to figure if we should be together. Not a relationship therapist, but once worked with a woman whose boyfriend had sexually assaulted a client while he was at work, but she was convinced it was just a misunderstanding. So I knew that was a relationship that wouldn't last, and that she struggled to pick stable partners. I was right. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.